Welcome in to the Rockies Insider. I'm your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons, and joining me today, very, very good friend of mine, very, very good Rockies beat reporter, Kevin Henry of Just Baseball. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, it's all good, man. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. You're rocking a little purple today.
Why
Nice.
not, right? Got the little CR over there. There it is. Anyway, yeah, got it rocking. I figured if I was going to be on your show, the Rockies Insider, I better Rockies up. So here you are.
Gotta rock the Rockies. Absolutely. Yeah, plenty to talk about today. Second half of the show, we'll get into some NL MVP, NL Rookie of the Year, end of season award votings. What are the top storylines to watch in the second half, really in the final 7 weeks of the season for the Rockies? We'll talk about the loss on Monday night in kind of heartbreaking fashion, disappointing, frustrating fashion. But let's talk about the news of the day, where we started on Monday. Kris Bryant onto the injured list once more with the lingering back issue that he's been having for a while. Third IL stint of the season, has already missed 74 games. When you saw this news and you thought back to the weekend of games and activities for Kris Bryant, were you confused? Were you puzzled? Were you disappointed? What went through your head?
I wish I could say I was shocked at this point, but obviously, I think we in the Rocky Mountain time zone have come to expect Kris Bryant to be hurt, and I hate to say that because I know that that's not good for the Rockies as a team. But at the same time, it's just one of those things that you feel like every time that there's a ball that's hit sharply to him in the outfield, or he gets hit by a pitch, or whatever it might be, you kind of wonder, what's going to be the ramifications of this? And there were a couple of times this past weekend during that series with the Braves and the Mets that, some things happened and you went, gosh, is KB going to be okay? And I think we've reached that point with KB and his Rockies tenure is any little thing, if it's a Ryan McMahon or Brendan Rodgers or whoever, they kind of dust it off. But when it's KB, you think, gosh, what's this going to lead to next?
And he's banged up to begin with, right? Has this back issue that could possibly need surgery to correct. So he's already, 3/4 of what he would typically be. So when he does go back on a ball like that, or if there is some kind of collision or something like that, a lunging play, a diving play, as you said, he's going to be maybe worse for the wear than somebody a little bit younger, somebody with a better track record. And this is the narrative that exists now because of all the IL stints. And what's wild to think about is here we are in year 3, and this deal isn't even halfway through the 7-year, $182 million contract that was signed ahead of the 2022 season.
I'm really starting to wonder if he's going to make it through the life of the contract. Not that the Rockies would cut him, but will his body really hold up that he's going to be able to fulfill the entire length of that contract? I'm not sure. I think we're seeing so many signs right now that back is worse than maybe we thought, or maybe, the Rockies even thought, that you think, can he do 4 more years of this? And I'm not sure at this point.
Yeah, already had an IL stint in April, low back strain, had the left rib contusion that ended up becoming like an oblique issue in June and July. And this one, I don't really remember any plays in particular in that Atlanta series where there was something that happened. He did get hit by a pitch in the Mets series right after Harrison Bader got hit and was not very happy about it. But that was a lower body injury, lower body hit by a pitch. I don't know if he had lunged forward. He did play after that and seemed to be fine. But yeah, he's a fraction of himself, unfortunately. And you're right to have those concerns, not only of just, well, we can get to the conversation about designating him for assignment or letting his contract go, waiving him, whatever. But even still, you say in 4 years time from now, or 3 years or 2 years, would we ever see him back on a playing field, even at the league minimum for another team? It's just like you said, can his body hold up to the rigors of the 162 game marathon?
And I know there are plenty of people out there that are like, well, you just need to DFA him. You just need to cut him. It's not working out. I don't see a scenario where Colorado is going to do that. I think that they brought him in to be kind of the face of the franchise, the tent pole in the lineup, the aircraft carrier, whatever you want to say about it, is that they brought him in for that. So I think to cut him or to DFA him would be such an acknowledgement that it's been a failure, and it has. Let's be perfectly honest. But still, I don't think the Rockies are going to let their pride let them do that, shall we say.
And when you think about him staying on the roster, you think about, well, that does take up a spot on the 40-man, more cases than not the 26-man roster. But this is a team now hurtling towards 100 losses for the second year in a row. They're essentially bringing back the entire roster for next year in 2025. And we know their inabilities to sign free agents, or really the reluctance of free agents to sign to Colorado. So it's not necessarily even a Colorado Rockies specific problem. Even when they do dip their toe in that water, they have a hard time, really pinpointing the right free agent that is going to be a positive fit. They've struggled to make difficult trades in which they have to part with something that they really value in order to get something else back. So they're running back for really almost the third year in a row, a 100 loss roster. And you say, well, Kris Bryant staying on this roster and staying on the 40-man doesn't really clog things up. Sure, you want to turn the roster over and turn some playing time over to the young guys, but that really remains to be seen. That's one spot on a 40-man. We've seen the Dodgers roster Andrew Tolles in order for him to continue to have insurance. We see guys that are getting Tommy John are going to be out for an entire year that end up getting rostered. So if they have to operate with a 39-man roster instead of a 40-man because of Kris Bryant, that's not a major detriment to this franchise where they're at this point in time.
Absolutely. And, I think there's a lot to be said for, as you were talking about next year's roster. It is, what is Kris Bryant's place on this roster? Yes, he's going to take up a spot, and let's go under the scenario that Charlie Blackmon does not return next year. I think that is still very much up in the air. But in a scenario where Charlie does not return, then you've got a DH spot that you could say, look, Kris is going to be our DH. He's not going to play in the field. We're going to limit his body out there, make sure that he's as healthy as humanly possible. Would that be a full-time DH scenario, knowing that you've got an outfield with hopefully Jordan Beck, hopefully Brenton Doyle, hopefully Nolan Jones? You've got a first base with Michael Toglia that could hopefully be handled. It feels like that's a fit that it could be if you wanted to protect Kris Bryant.
It is, yeah. Blackmon, as you mentioned, is a free agent after this year, or is retired after this year. So as of right now, his 1-year deal that he got for $13 million for this year is going to come off the books. Daniel Bard, $9.5 million coming off the books. Elias Diaz, $6 million. Austin Gomber remains to be seen. Could he be a guy that gets designated for assignment? He's set to make probably about $5 to $6 million in his final year of arbitration. So they're going to be saving about $35 million or so over this year's roster to next. They're probably projected at about $140 million for 2025. Where are you going to necessarily spend that extra bit of money? And you don't need to save that money, right? Trading Kris Bryant, I think there was some conversation at the beginning of the year. I'm not sure where it emanated from of, hey, what if you traded Tovar and Bryant? Then you get that money off the books. Rockies have some money to spend. People are still coming to the ballpark to see a last place club. So they're not really hard up for money for the payroll. So him making $27-28 million over the next 4 years doesn't really hamstring them in any way going forward.
It really doesn't. And again, I think you've got to almost take the money side out of it and say it's more about the production side. And in that scenario we were talking about a minute ago, if Kris Bryant is going to be your DH, is he going to be a good enough DH to really hold down that spot every day? He was starting to show some signs of things. Again, singles, not nothing power related during the stretch right before he went back on the IL. But I think that's the next question you've got to ask is, if Kris Bryant's going to be your full-time DH, can he really produce like a full-time DH should? He's never going to be a Marcell Ozuna. That's just not going to happen. But is it going to be enough for him to bat lower in the lineup, that 6th, 7th spot, and be a singles guy?
Yeah, I don't know that I can safely say anymore that Kris Bryant is going to win a batting title. That was something that I really thought early on, just seeing him, just watching him take batting practice, how easy his swing was and how just easy it is, basically. There's no other way to say it. He just has this nice, easy swing. The ball doesn't really fly off his bat quite as much as it does in spring training once you get to the regular season, but just can spray singles around all day long. And we've seen that. And he's probably going to be a 300 hitter while he's with the Rockies overall. But is he going to provide that power? Is he going to provide that pop? And if you do have that young roster, you mentioned those three guys in the outfield in Beck, Nolan Jones, and Brenton Doyle. And there's at least three more guys down in the minors that are waiting to get some playing time. So you play the three best defenders, and whoever is left behind as number 4 should be your DH, except Kris Bryant is going to be there and not maybe providing the same dynamics that Charlie Blackmon is able to provide. Can steal a base here and there, certainly can run into a couple balls and hit some home runs and see a lot of pitches too. Be that leadoff hitter, create a little bit of stability for the lineup. That kind of remains to be seen if Kris Bryant can be that guy going forward.
And you and I were at a game earlier. Forgive me, I don't remember which one it was, but Kris Bryant was coming home on a throw and was out by a quite a mile. And we both looked at each other, and it was like, he just doesn't have the speed right now. And again, I know that that's a lot to do with the back. And, the back has so many different lingering issues with it. But as you said, Chuck can still steal a base. There are guys on the team that can still steal a base. That's not KB. And he's going to be a guy that, as your DH later in the game, if you're going to need a run, you may pinch hit for him, because he's just not going to be that guy who's going to be able to motor around from first on a double.
Chuck knows his limitations at this point in his career, and he can work around them because he's a veteran. And Brian is really adjusting right now to this point in his career where there are a lot more limitations. And if you try to do a little something extra, I think that's where you could have those injuries flare up. And I'm kind of curious, do you think Kris Bryant comes back this season? If this is, again, already a lost campaign and you're not going for the postseason and you've got 4 more years, you should be thinking about those next 4 years. You should at least be thinking about 2025. Is it good for Kris Bryant to come back at all on the playing field for the Rockies in 2024?
I don't know. I honestly was thinking about that before we came on today. And one thing I looked up and, is Kris Bryant's played 159 games for the Rockies during his playing career. So we're still 3 short of a full season that he's put together since he signed with Colorado. Trevor Story, our old friend that showed up, he's on his way back from injury. He's played 145 games. And I really wonder which one's going to hit 162 games with their new franchise first. And in my heart of hearts, I think it could well be Trevor Story who gets to 162 first, even though he's got a longer way to go.
And who's going to get to 200 games played first? Who's going to get to 300?
Yeah.
Trevor Story, this most recent injury was very flukish. And as you brought up, we're in season 3 here, and Kris Bryant is yet to provide 162 games played. I had to look this up, and since 2022, since the start of 2022, as you mentioned, Kris Bryant, 159 games played in nearly 3 seasons. That's tied for 372nd most games played in all of MLB. So 371 players over the last 3 years have played more games. Who's just ahead of him on that list at 371 with 161 games played? Former Rockies prospect Tyler Nevin. That's baseball, Kevin. That's baseball.
That's baseball. Exactly. But going back to your question, I seriously do wonder what the advantage would be of KB coming back this year. If he is well enough to come back, let's say the Labor Day time period, let's say sometime around maybe the Orioles coming in right before the holiday, whatever that might be, is it worth him being there? Would he really provide that much of a lineup? I'm going to guess the competitor in KB is going to say, yeah, I want to be back. Yeah, I want to play. Buddy put me in the lineup, all that good stuff. And, let's not forget the Cubs are coming to, Coors in the middle of September. So there may be a little bit of extra momentum there just to be back in front of those Cubs fans again. But what benefit is it going to provide? I just don't know the answer.
September 13th through 15th, a weekend series, as you mentioned, against those Cubbies. That's certainly one he's probably targeted. But again, his value on the field kind of remains to be seen because he's injured, because of the back issues that he's had. His value to the clubhouse, obviously a lot more. We got to see that actually firsthand when we were in Chicago, being a leader to Nolan Jones and saying, hey, man, Let's see if we can get to 20 home runs. Let's see if we can get to 60 RBI. Let's have a couple goals. If you hit those goals, maybe there could be a Rolex watch in there for you. And sure enough, it was. So he's still an important figure, I think, in that clubhouse. So he's not going to disappear by any means, but disappeared off the field. There's probably strong odds to suggest that we probably won't see him again in 2024 for the Rockies.
And if that's the case, I know that Rockies fans, to be perfectly frank, probably won't miss him. There's not a lot that he's going to provide to the lineup every day. And if you're starting to have some of those call-ups come up in September, if you're starting to test some of those new guys, when Nolan Jones returns, once Jordan Beck gets back into his rhythm, I don't know where the place is for him, to be honest. And especially if it starts to become that this is Charlie's last year. As well as I do that they're going to play Charlie as much as they humanly can in order for that to be good for him.
Kris Bryant, this marquee figure that unfortunately they can't keep on the field. Charlie Blackmon very much could be at the top of the marquee should there be some kind of announcement made in September, maybe late in the year. My predictions, and I don't want to get ahead of things too much in the prediction game as far as Charlie Blackmon, I think we'll get word in game 161 that, hey guys, tomorrow's Charlie's final game. We've got his T-ball coach flying in. We've got his kindergarten teacher coming in. We've got his favorite fly fishing buddy. This is all going on behind the scenes. It wouldn't surprise me if something like that happens. It gets me excited to think about that celebration of Charlie Blackmon. But you're right. We don't necessarily know what to expect with Chuck here.
We don't. And really, after Todd Helton Day that's coming up this weekend, there's not a lot on the calendar that you can circle and say, oh, this is be worth it for the Rockies, especially the Broncos are really starting to take things over on the sports scene and everything else. So you kind of wonder, would there be something later where it would be that celebration of Charlie? Again, don't know if he's going to retire. Don't know any of that, but just speculating what it could be like if this is indeed Chuck's last season.
Yeah, you could go out and have him make the announcement that, hey, today's my final game, and then retire his number, because I think he very much deserves to have number
Very
19
much
up in the rafters. And then certainly that does open up the conversation to all those other players that were great Rockies, right? Because right now there's just two, and they're both Hall of Famers. Charlie Blackmon probably not going to make the Hall of Fame despite having a solid case in general. Shout out in the chat to Noah. Noah's amped to have you here, Kev.
Noah, good man. I'll tell you what. Yep, he has been great to have in the press box, and still hoping I'll back out of Breckenridge for Saturday's game and maybe run into Noah and the rest of the crew, including you.
I know Buddy will say from time to time, Kris Bryant is, he's the best hitter on our team. He probably has the best resume. I mean, I say probable, and you go, well, he does have a Rookie of the Year award, and he does have an NL MVP, which nobody else in the clubhouse has. But Charlie Blackmon is somebody that has, a little bit more quantity than those quality seasons,
Sure.
Multi-time All-Star still. Are we still going to hear anyone from the Rockies organization say Kris Bryant is the best player on this club right now?
I think there's still a narrative to be said for that. And I think that it is based on past experience rather than present results. And I think that's the important thing to remember, is that there's still a hope that KB can become that player that he was with the Cubs. I don't know that his back's going to allow him to do that, but I think their hope springs eternal. And I think that this is one of those scenarios. But, I really do think that KB he's kind of become, and I want to see what you think about this, the Daniel Murphy right now with the Rockies. How we thought that Daniel Murphy was going to be Mr. Doubles whenever he signed with the Rocks and hitting in the gaps, and oh my gosh, it's going to be great. And we said the same thing about KB, and neither one really materialized. So it feels like that this is kind of the same path where we thought we were going to get one player, and yet here's the other one.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison. It is funny because when you talk with Ryan McMahon in particular, because he's really the one guy who's still around from 2018, 2019. But when you talk to him, or even Trevor Story, when he came back with Boston, they bring up guys like Ian Desmond and Daniel Murphy. Like Desmond, I think got a raw deal, and you go back and look at his numbers, 20 homers, 20 stolen bases, right? And so his numbers are a little bit more solid than you think about. With Daniel Murphy, he was there for 2 years, one of which was with no fans, and so really made no impact on the field, but his impact off the field in the clubhouse loomed a lot larger. And I think the same is true for Kris Bryant, where his impact on the field has been rather minimal, but behind the scenes and in the clubhouse has been more so. So it really will be interesting to see what happens over time with these young Rockies players and say, man, when I was coming up, Kris Bryant was integral to my growth and my development because of X, Y, and Z. And could have some fans going, oh yeah, that's right. I've kind of forgotten about that because the on-field record, wasn't as strong.
Yeah, and you brought up Ian Desmond, and we know how hunted he was, shall we say, by Rockies fans. I mean, I remember that 4 strikeout game against the Angels where the boos rained down, and we've heard those boos for KB too. And I think that comes along with get big expectations with a big contract, and you don't produce. And even in a market like Denver, which is absolutely, I will fight to a bitter end, that it's a baseball town, but it's also one where fans are very forgiving. But still, when you don't produce like that, they will let you know it.
Got to talk about the 5-4 loss to the Diamondbacks on Monday night. Part of this conversation with Kris Bryant, when you look at the starting lineup last night, Jordan Beck not in the starting lineup despite getting called up. I'm kind of okay with that, partially because you do have 2 left-handers coming up in Eduardo Rodriguez and Jordan Montgomery on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I think he'll be in the starting lineup. But a player I can't really figure out, and maybe you could help me out on this, that is just not getting playing time, Hunter Goodman. What's happening with him since June 24th? 60 plate appearances. Sam Hilliard got called up and 77 plate appearances. We know Jake Cave has been playing a lot, 116 going into last night. Kris Bryant even with 54. But Hunter Goodman doesn't get sent down to AAA just to get regular playing time, not really getting an opportunity to play right field, to play first base. Michael Toglia has been there. That's fine. Even when Elias Diaz first went down and Goodman was catching, Bud Black did say, you know what, maybe we've made a misstep with this guy. Maybe we should have been giving him more opportunities behind the plate as a catcher. And we're not seeing him in the outfield. We're not seeing him DH. We're not even seeing him catching. Kevin, what's going on with Hunter Goodman?
Well, I think you touched on it. I think he's blocked right now in a lot of ways. And I think the other day, whenever Hunter was in the outfield, and unfortunately he had the misplay on that ball, and he was no longer in the game shortly thereafter. And I think Bud Black is a manager that you earn his trust. And he is a guy that he wants to see results, but he also, and you've heard him say numerous times, like I have, he doesn't want to let a defensive play lose him the game. He's talked about that with Trejo, with Shunk. If he's going to put guys in the lineup on a spot start, whatever it might be, he has to know that they're going to perform just as well as a Mac or a Tovar or whoever it might be. And the other day, Hunter Goodman had that misstep, unfortunately. And so I think even when the chances, whenever he has gotten in there, he's been pushing a little bit. But you're right. Totally has secured first base for right now. I think that they are going to let Diaz and Stalling handle the catching. I think the veteran catchers are very important in Bud Black's philosophy. So where do you play Hunter Goodman? And I'm like you. I think that Hunter could benefit from being at AAA, getting some at-bats regularly, things like that, rather than just sitting and being that backup who is almost, shall we say, a desperation play at this point for the Rockies.
It's funny you mentioned Alan Trejo, because in doing some research last night, and Alan Trejo, a lot of playing time, really as the backup shortstop. So you just need his glove off the bench, but defense first over the bat. Alan Trejo right now, and it's going to stay that way since he's with the Dodgers organization, goes down in Rockies history as having the most plate appearances without an extra base hit. 67 this season, 0 extra base hit. Previous record was a gentleman by the name of Thomas Field, another middle infielder, 51 plate appearances. So Trejo, again, to your point, glove first, valued over that pop. So very interesting there. Let's get to the 5-4 loss on Monday night to the Diamondbacks. Bradley Blaylock getting the start there. As I sort of mentioned on Sunday, he was not the odd man out, but he was the only man in on the 40-man roster that could possibly start, with so many of the long reliever types having been used up over the weekend. Simple roster math. He makes his Rockies debut and looks really solid, almost gets the quality start, 1 out short, but 5 2/3 innings pitched, gives up the 3 runs, does not walk a batter. and looks really solid against the Diamondbacks team who has scored the most runs in all of baseball. Pretty impressive what he was able to do. 6 hits, no walks, and 4 Ks.
We're all about the immediate reaction, right? And so you look at the immediate reaction of him coming over in that trade from Milwaukee for Nick Mears, and he looked good last night. I read some of the comments from Bud this morning about the start, what he thought. He mentioned the quality of pitches. He seemed to be impressed with what he saw, and like you said, it felt like right there at the very end, if he just could have gotten past another couple of batters, that absolutely it would have not only helped the Rockies but also helped him as well get that W.
And provided some much needed length for the
Yes.
Rockies rotation, because I know going into this game where it was an all-time low, fourth fewest innings by starters over a 7-game stretch in franchise history. The lowest was 23 2/3 innings pitched back in 2019. And who helped snap that streak on September 5th? Here's a name: Tim Melville, 5 2/3 innings pitched. So helped actually snap a 9-game losing streak. So Blaylock doing really solid. Retired 6 in a row at one point, his second time through the order. 1, 2, 3 first inning. On the other side, Brandon Pfaadt, 7 innings pitched, gives up 4 runs, but walks none, strikes out 11. Dude fills up the strike zone. 6th starter this season to throw to get 11 strikeouts against the Rockies this year.
And I think that was the thing that I noticed, is that it was just going to be that night where they were going to have to take advantage of every batted ball, because you knew that the strikeouts were going to come. They just seemed to come in droves. But one thing that I liked about Blaylock is that he obviously kept right up with that. It didn't faze him that there wasn't much going on with the offense when there was from time to time, but for a lot of strikeouts. So I really liked the poise. I really liked the approach last night. And let's face it, it's probably not be the last time we see him on the mound this year.
Not bad for a guy who is yet to touch AAA. So making the jump up from the AA Hartford Yard Goats, I think that was definitely a positive. Now, by comparison, the Rockies have 6 outings where the opposing starting pitcher has struck them out 11 or more times. By comparison, White Sox only 3 times. Seattle, who has the most strikeouts in MLB, 4 times. Marlins only 2. It happened 9 times last year. So got a few more probably on the way. Brendan Rodgers looked solid. RBI sac fly in his second plate appearance. Home run right after that. And just before that, made a nice diving play. So he's been super hot over the last 7 games. 11 for 26 and 1183 OPS. He's had a sneaky good season. Not great, but good. Had the one IL stint where he missed 11 games. He's reached 100 games played for only the 3rd time in his career. Probably going to be a little shy of his career high of 137 games played in 2022. But sneaky good year, probably on the outside looking in terms of being a Gold Glove Award finalist at second base this year for Rodgers.
Yeah, and I think that sneaky good year is something that it'll be interesting to see what happens in the offseason. Our friend Thomas Harding speculated that there was going to be a lot of trade rumors again this offseason around Rodgers, and he's putting up the numbers right now that it would seem that he might draw some interest. So I'll be real curious to see, you talk about the roster coming back next year, if Rodgers is a part of that or not.
Also got to mention in our brief little minor league minute, might be more like 30 seconds, depending on how long I can drag this out. Chase Dollander, Eastern League Player of the Week. He's been really exciting. Him, Sean Sullivan doing it at AA. Now with, as we just mentioned, with Bradley Blaylock, guys are getting promoted from AA Hartford. And so these guys are now, in theory, one step away. Do you think we see them ultimately here in the final stretch, either Dollander or Sean Sullivan?
I don't. I don't think that they're going to rush them that much. I think some of the other guys, they'll feel comfortable with them making the jump, the Tanner Gordons, the Blaylocks, things like that. But I think these prize arms that they're really looking at as such a big part of the bedrock of the future, I absolutely don't see them rushing them this year, my personal take.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with you there, Kev. Kevin Henry, Just Baseball. Make sure you're checking out his work. So glad you're joining me today. I wanted to discuss the top storylines and milestones to watch in the second half for the Rockies. I keep saying second half. I mean, it's August. The All-Star break was really late. We've got 7 weeks left. It's crazy. I think the Rockies still have like 25 home games, something like that, maybe 23. There's still a lot of season left. I mean, we've got a quarter of the season to go, right? Rockies just played, I think, game 120 at 162.
Yeah,
That's still a lot of baseball left, isn't there?
there is. There is. There's a lot of things still to watch for this year. Absolutely.
A lot can happen. We'll talk about who might debut here in the final 7 weeks. But I think the top storylines right now for the Colorado Rockies start and end with their center fielder, Brenton Doyle. And I might have you rank how excited you are for all of these different things, because there are so many different storylines, so many different milestones he is trying to reach that could really make him, at least in a singular season, an all-time Rockies great. For one, if he's able to reach 30 home runs and 30 stolen bases, that has only been done 3 other times by the Blake Street Bombers, Dante Bichette, Ellis Burks, both in 96, and Larry Walker in 1997 in his MVP season. So we're approaching 30 years without a 30-30 season. And Brenton Doyle, who did steal his 23rd base, I know on Monday night, he's there. It's in his sights. He mentioned it the other night that, you know what, it's still in play.
Yep. And I think he's absolutely going to push for that. So I think a 30-30 thing and really having that as a focus. And could this happen? We talked about what's going to be for the Rockies to watch after this Todd Helton day. What's going to be for them to push? And I think it's going to be a lot of Brenton Doyle right now. And with Jackson Merrill, the way that he's playing in center field right now, I know there's some buzz out there about, is Brenton Doyle going to have the Gold Glove again this year? I shake my head that's even a discussion. But I know Jackson Merrill's getting a lot of love for the way that he's adjusted, his rookie year, all that stuff. But I think having a 30-30 watch would be a pretty darn cool thing.
It would. There was a graphic the other day on MLB.com talking about players with power and speed, and you see the greats of the game: Ohtani, Ellie De La Cruz, so many others on that list, Jose Ramirez, and joining that group was Brenton Doyle. I think that's critical, I think, for so many Rockies fans to say, hey, wait a minute, we've got a guy that can hang with the best in the sport. Sure, we've got a 100-loss season, but there's something that we can hang our hat on. And I think that's something that fans are paying attention to a lot more so than I think last year when Nolan Jones was going for 2020, which was impressive, but he had gotten that late jump. He didn't really become a figure on this roster until basically June. And so I think a lot of fans were late catching up to realizing how good Nolan Jones was. People, Rockies fans, baseball fans, know how good Brenton Doyle really is. So I think a lot of folks are going to be invested in whether or not he can reach 30-30.
And that trajectory that he's had this year where, he showed us some things he could do last year, but absolutely becoming that all-around player this year and just the steps that he has taken. And again, it's ironic to me how far that he's progressed and how much that Nolan Jones has taken a step back, and I know we're still waiting for Nolan to come back to the major league roster, but I know how tight they are. And to see Brenton kind of shooting like this, I know that Nolan's not only cheering him on, but he's also super jealous and probably inspired by that as well.
You also mentioned the Gold Glove race for center field. I still think he's a favorite for that. He could also be in the running for the Platinum Glove Award. I mentioned that to Buddy last week, and he said, you know what? Yeah, very much. Brenton Doyle could be there. And I know Rockies fans that pay attention and have that chip on their shoulder saying, oh, no one really is paying attention to us, and you've got to be over the top in order to get attention. There were those years where Tony Walters probably deserved to be a finalist as a catcher. Ryan McMahon, people are still shocked that he's never won a Gold Glove Award. And you say, all right, sometimes you have to do it 2 years in a row to get a certain amount of notoriety. So sort of remains to be seen if Jackson Merrill is going to get knocked for being a rookie and only doing it in his first year. I haven't got a chance to watch him every single day like some of the beat reporters in San Diego who may notice that there aren't every ball that he gets to, that there are some miscues he has. The dude hasn't played center field before. He's a shortstop in the minors. So I imagine that he can be a little bit rough around the edges just a little bit. So it will be interesting if he can go Gold Glove in center and Platinum Glove Award in the National League. That would, again, put him on a whole other level in franchise terms.
Absolutely. You look at the defensive year that he's had, those oh wow moments, that catch in San Diego while Jackson Merrill was watching. That's still one that I think you can go back to. And I think, you mentioned McMahon, some of the defensive plays that he has come up with, he's slumped at the plate. He's had his issues as of late, but absolutely what he's done on defense, I think that for Rockies fans to see both McMahon and Doyle in those highlight reels, every week, I think that's important, that they've got something to say. These guys are doing among the best in the game.
I'm also thinking Doyle has a chance, but he might be on the outside looking in for Silver Slugger Award. I mean, he was so close to being an all-star. If they'd pushed the all-star break back maybe another week, he probably would have been an all-star, and that also would have changed how voters and end of the year award decisions get made. But the Silver Slugger Award really just goes to 3 outfielders. They don't really consider just a center fielder. So Jackson Merrill has really good offensive numbers as well. Still, there's a chance for that where he really could take all of the awards, all of the metallic gloves, and all of the metallic bats in Silver Slugger Award. So we'll sort of wait to see what happens with that.
Yeah, and I think if he does put together that 30-30 season, it starts to get more national publicity. I know that whenever the Mets were in town, and you probably heard the story as well, there was somebody in the Mets clubhouse that will remain nameless, but that it was the second game of the series, and all of a sudden they were like, this Brent Doyle guy, he's actually pretty good. I hadn't heard much about him. I hadn't seen much about him, but all of a sudden he was starting to win these people over, even on the East Coast, that may not be watching those Rockies games. So I think he's starting to turn a lot of heads.
He is. He definitely is. Ezequiel Tovar, another guy that we'll have to watch here in the final few weeks. A couple milestones he could hit. Could set the franchise record for most doubles by a shortstop. You prefer homers over doubles, but still, Trevor Story had 42 in 2018. Before that, Nafi Perez had 39 in the year 2000. Tovar did hit 37 last year, most for a rookie. He's got 32 right now. Again, that's a shot. That's another one of those that's in play. It's a nice little feather in the cap.
Absolutely. And anytime you can bring up Nafi Perez, that's always a good thing. But the thing that I'm really watching with Tovar is, what's he going to do with those strikeouts? What's he going to do to really try to hone in and not swing outside the zone and chase pitches and things like that? And again, a young player with so much room for growth and opportunity, and we see what he's doing. But I think those are the areas that if we can see him really round those off and make sure that those strikeouts aren't alarmingly high, then that shows what kind of growth that he could have as a young guy.
Yeah, you had a great segue there into the strikeouts, because unfortunately I don't have very much more positive milestones really for the Rockies to get to. I mean, Ryan McMahon, if you look at the all-time leaderboard list, there he can move up a couple, but he's not really a top 10 guy right now in his career. Been around for a while, but need to be around a lot longer, need to have more all-star type seasons. So
yeah.
No other major milestones. It's kind of on the negative side. 200 strikeouts, and Tovar was the guy at the time of recording. He was right around 150 strikeouts, on pace, I believe, just under 200 strikeouts for how much he gets off. At this point last year, had 118 strikeouts through 119 games. So he's right around Actually, no, he's ahead of the pace of where he was at last year. And we saw what happened with Ryan McMahon, who's got 137 himself. So he's, again, probably on the right side of 200. But we saw that last year where there were a few games late in the year where Ryan McMahon got the day off in order to help prevent him from striking out 200 times and staying away from that magic number. It'll be very interesting to see if the Rockies, if Bud Black will help try to protect Tovar from reaching 200.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think that is something with a young player that would be a good thing to do. I remember I was in Toronto with the Rockies. This was back in April. You mentioned the Kris Bryant first back injury that happened in Toronto when he crashed into the wall there. But one thing that Toronto manager John Schneider said about the Rockies was that and I remember him calling them a very aggressive team at the plate. And for him, I think that was a very nice way to say that this is a team that we can also throw a few pitches at and hopefully get them to swing. But that was also right after they had just bombed. I think it was a Gosman that they bombed in that first game of the series. Yeah. So he was saying it as a positive right after that game. but it was also something that he saw already. They love to swing the bat.
Yeah, they're aggressive, and I think that's okay. Like the three true outcomes, that is very much what baseball is in
Yeah,
today's day and age, and the rule changes trying to promote more stolen bases, more contact in general, with there not being a shift, even though you can have a middle infielder pretty much right behind second base. So, I don't think we've seen batting averages increase that much. In fact, as of right now, there might only be one player batting above 300 that qualifies in the National League. So again, that being said, we still have a three true outcome league with strikeouts, walks, and home runs. So I'm okay with Tovar staying in there. If he strikes out 200 times, who cares? It's still early on in his career. I don't necessarily know it's going to do more damage to pull him out of the lineup and try to protect him from that. I think if anything, it might help him to say, hey, look at these failures that you've had, or man, you've got this dubious number, so to speak, on your record. Hey, let's now go work and let's fix this thing. I think that might even benefit him more than protecting him from 200 strikeouts.
yeah, great point. It may be something that inspires him a whole lot more and motivates him for next season to make sure that he doesn't even get close to that or surpass that number. Absolutely.
Kevin, will somebody on the Colorado Rockies win 10 games this year? Pitcher wins are dead. We know that, but still.
There, Manny Randall just shivered. I'm going to say no. How about that? I'm going to say that that's not going to happen this year. I think that there is so much that happens with some late inning win vultures and things like that, that I don't see a 10-win starter or 10-win pitcher among the starters personally. What about you?
I don't either. Yeah. And is that terribly important? Like, let's focus on 100+ losses more than just a singular pitcher winning 10 games.
Agreed.
It's whatever. But Cal Quantrill, leader in the clubhouse with 7. Gomber is next up there with a handful, right? After that, you got basically 2, 3, and 4 for most wins in the top 5 for the Rockies this year, all relievers. Beeks with 6. So he could go down as number 2, the second most amount of wins for a guy who didn't even play 2 months of the season with the Rockies. Kinley 5, Lawrence 4. Last time the Rockies had somebody with 10 or more wins was Germán Marquez, where he went 12-11 in that all-star season. That's been it since 2020. Wow. Only one guy with 10 or more wins. Only the Washington Nationals since 2020 have had one player or one season with 10 or more wins. That was Patrick Corbin just last year. So Rockies really hurting for starting pitching, really hurting for wins in general.
Yeah, and that's what I was just getting ready to say, is I think that's a testament to not only consistency, but injuries as well. And I think that you look back at all these guys in that starting rotation that have been filtered through there because of injuries. And obviously we're still waiting to see what the rest of this year looks like with that as well.
Let's talk about some of the minor league promotions that we could possibly see during the final weeks of the season. 3 guys right now on the 40-man roster have still yet to get any in-game action on the varsity squad. Antoine Kelly, look it up. He's a Rocky. He's on the 40-man. Juan Mejia, Yanquiel Fernandez. Do we see them? Do we even see a little bit more of Greg Jones and Adiel Amador? What are your thoughts on those 5?
I would think of those 5, I'm going to go with Amador. And I'm also going to go with Yanquiel. I think that they will bring up somebody with a little flair, somebody with a little pop. Again, it's such a crowded outfield, though. That's the thing. Depending on what happens with health and everything else the rest of the year, how do you shuffle Yanquiel in? But I think they'll at least bring him up enough so that he gets some of that big league experience.
Greg Jones has been playing far too much outfield to be that utility infielder that I thought that was why they had acquired him. Thought that was why they had traded Joe Rock to the Tampa Bay Rays to sort of give them another depth at infield. You don't have Alan Trejo. It allows you to roster some more guys in the outfield, get more at-bats to spread around. But alas, he's been in the outfield, and the defense, has not been great by all reports. I would also go Amador as number 1 and Yanquiel number 2. And I would put Antoine Kelly there, despite having never laid eyes on him before. I don't even know if I've seen a photograph of him in a Rockies minor league affiliate uniform yet, but he's a left-hander, and we saw Chasen Shreve get an opportunity just this past week, getting called up, only made 1 appearance, but we could possibly see Antoine Kelly at some point.
I got to admit, I'm still surprised that Shreve didn't last longer. I'm still surprised. I thought they would keep a southpaw option in there, but obviously that's why I'm not the GM or the manager. There you go.
Also, position players, Drew Romo 297 entering this week. League average is 263. So, as much as we know the PCL is a hitter's environment, he's above the league average by 30 plus points. League average OPS is 803. Romo is at 828, 13 homers, 59 RBI. So, he's doing it offensively. Defense has been his calling card. It was kind of strange that Elias Diaz or Jacob Stallings did not get dealt at the trade deadline. I think each of those circumstances individually might make some sense, but Romo, who needs to be added to the 40-man roster this winter, you would have thought they would have freed up a little bit of playing time for him to get his feet wet. I don't know if there's enough room in the pool for him to dunk those toes in.
I completely agree with you. You look back and you think, oh my gosh, how excited were we to see Zach Veen and Drew Romo? Those were the two guys who were all the buzz. Man, we can't wait till they come to Coors Field. And I don't think we see either one of them this year. Absolutely not. I think Romo is a guy that whenever a Diaz comes off the roster this year, that Romo takes his place on that 40-man and he gets playing time next year.
Yeah. Could have a fun camp battle next February down in Scottsdale for the majority of backup innings between Romo and Goodman. That certainly might be a fun battle worth keeping an eye on a little bit. And the starting pitching front, we talked about Chase Dollander, I know, as probably not getting that opportunity just yet, and that's okay. Got to build up a little bit more innings on that arm. I think it's okay to protect him down at Double-A Hartford for right now. But Carson Palmquist was incredible in Double-A, 3.20 ERA in 17 games started at Double-A, rebounded after a rough start in Las Vegas, which everybody has a rough start in AAA Las Vegas. So I think Carson Palmquist, I would really be surprised if he doesn't make his major league debut in September.
I agree with that completely. I know it's going to take some roster moves and things like that to make sure that happens, but I think Palmquist is a guy who definitely is on that track to be there.
Yeah, and with Ryan Feltner on the IL, like again, there's only so many bodies in his way. They're few and far between. A lot of long relievers, and that's fine. And so if you want to have a bullpen game, once every other week, that's okay. But it still seems as if there's going to be room in that rotation. We'll wait to see what happens with Kyle Freeland, how long he's going to be out for, Feltner as well. So I think there's going to be room and opportunities for him. And then on the reliever front, Jaden Hill is another player that needs to be added to the 40-man roster, or else he's going to be lost potentially in the Rule 5 draft. 3.52 ERA. Huge breakout season for him at Double-A. 56 strikeouts in 38 and a third innings pitched. Maybe the best number is 11 walks, keeping that down. And then a sleeper, Dugan Darnell, might be the best option at Triple-A. 3.92 ERA, mostly at Triple-A Albuquerque.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of Dugan Darnell fans out there, and for good reason, absolutely. But I'm glad that you mentioned. Excuse me. I'm glad that you brought up Jaden, because I think that he is a guy that it's very possible he could be the pitcher we see in September, even above Palmquist, because I think that bullpen's going to need something. And I also think that Rockies fans need to see something in that back end that's going to excite them. I mean, Vodnik has done well. He's done a good job, but they need something else. They need that younger guy coming in along with Vodnik, and I think that could be a perfect time to slide him in.
They need some hot heat injection. They need some flamethrowers, man. They need that. Jaden Hill, I think, definitely would provide that. So a couple guys there that you could see. I mean, we just threw 9 names out there. You got to think at least 3 of them are going to debut. If not, that's almost problematic.
All right, if we bat 3 for 9, not a bad thing at all, right?
We're going to the Hall of Fame in that case.
Exactly. Let's do it.
Let's get to the end of the year award votings. Now, we can talk about this as openly, as honestly as we want, partially because we don't know who we're going to be voting for yet. We might be finding out soon.
True.
But BBWA end of year award voting, Rookie of the Year, Paul Skeens is the name, but I think Jackson Merrill, who's been doing it since South Korea, that was when he started.
Yeah.
He's probably more of the front runner in the Jackson Merrill, Paul Skeens conversation.
I agree. And I think it all depends on the rest of the year for Skeens, because obviously he has such a limited time to impress, and how much more does he have left in the tank for the rest of this year? I think it's Skeens to lose right now, but I also think you're hearing a lot of buzz about Jackson Merrill. We talked about him a minute ago with the Gold Glove, and I certainly think Rookie of the Year as well.
And if Skeens is really at the front of the Cy Young Award conversation, that almost doesn't matter what Jackson Merrill is doing, right? And as much as great as it is to have a 20-year-old kid who's never played center field playing center field after coming up as a shortstop, like that's a great narrative. But if we're talking about the award of what you did on the field, that's what it's about, right? It's not necessarily about any of the intangibles. It's what you did as a rookie. It's a fun conversation to have, a long conversation, probably not one that should be in a snippet like over in TikTok. For anyone over there, Patrick D. Lyons, MLB, getting roasted for my Shohei Ohtani takes, but oh well. We'll get to that in just a second. There's a lot of really good rookies this year. I don't know if it's as good as the group last year. I think it might be a little bit deeper, but you also got Shota Imanaga, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who's only made 14 starts. Another 20-year-old, Jackson Chourio, Joey Ortiz, Jacob Young in Washington, who's been sneaky good, Mason Wynn, Michael Busch, and got to give some love to our guy here for the Rockies, Victor Vodnik, leading all rookie relievers with 8 saves.
Absolutely. And I really do like the Shota, Skeens, Merrill. I kind of like that as the trifecta. And I think if those guys are your top 3, that's a heck of a top 3. But there's certainly other guys that could slip in there in this final few weeks of the season. But I think the fact that we're talking about 2 pitchers being in there, I think that says a lot as well, honestly.
It does. Manager of the year. I think I had 5 guys that I put down, and the final 3 pretty much it's all dependent on where they end up. Mike Schilt, Carlos Mendoza of the Mets, Torey Lovullo of the Diamondbacks. If the Padres or the Diamondbacks can win the NL West, Padres do it. Schilt, manager of the year, especially everything that's been happening in San Diego over the last few campaigns. Torey Lovullo, if he goes out and wins the NL West, he becomes manager of the year. So those are the wild cards. But then 1 and 2 as of right now, I mean, it's still going to be hard to knock Pat Murphy off the mantle with what he's been able to do in Milwaukee. And also credit to Phillies manager Rob Thompson.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are deserving, but I think you're right. I think what happens that NL West race will determine if a Torey or a Schilt will be the guy who slides in there. But the Brewers are so under the radar. I think you talk so often about the great teams in MLB or the ones that are exciting. Milwaukee's never mentioned in there, but yet there they are, just plugging along, even without Yelich being in the lineup. So yeah, Pat Murphy absolutely deserves some credit for that.
The most exciting thing about the Milwaukee Brewers is the slide in left center and Bernie the Brewer going down it. That's it. Brewers fans don't even care about the actual home run. They care about the home run celebration with the slide. So, I think Pat Murphy has to be number 1 on a lot of people's leaderboards there going forward. Cy Young Award, this one's really tight. And, depending on which metric you use, you're going to have a lot of different answers as to far as, who is the best. Had a conversation this week on who's better baseball about using Fangraphs version of WAR versus Baseball Reference version of WAR and what each one does differently. One is not hypothetical, but it's saying, hey, you know what? This guy's gotten a little bit lucky and, he probably should have been giving up more home runs and giving up more runs. And he's gotten a little bit lucky there, or he's been striking out a ton of guys, but the defense hasn't been supporting him. So he's been a little unlucky. And so it's a little hypothetical where I think Baseball Reference is just bottom line. Here are the numbers and here's their value, regardless of if it's been lucky or not. So to me, if you really just push all of that aside, Zach Wheeler, I feel like, is having a Cy Young Award season, putting up the innings, has the low ERA, doing it against every other team's ace as their number 1 for the Phillies. Yep. And he's been doing it for a few years now. And I think he might have been done wrong a few years ago when Corbin Burns won it, because Wheeler just goes out there and posts. And so I think it's his award to lose, but it really could go any number of ways based on the final month and a half of the season.
Absolutely. And I think if there's a way that the Braves claw their way back into this and are actually relevant, I absolutely think Chris Sale's going to be that guy. I think he's going to get a lot of love for coming back, for reestablishing himself as a dominant pitcher. And we talked about Skeens earlier. Obviously, he's a guy that he's got all the buzz behind his name right now. And is it weird that Zach Wheeler feels like he's kind of under the radar, knowing that those other 2 storylines are going up? But I think you're spot on. I do think it's Wheeler's to lose, but I think if he loses it to anybody, it could well be Sale.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that probably prefer Sale a little bit in this argument, but again, sift through the numbers just a little bit and see what the value that Zach Wheeler has. And if you wanted to put money on someone, if you wanted to bet, make a friendly bet, who would you rather have for the final week, a month and a half of the season? Sale, who's only just now rebounding and doing this, or someone like Zach Wheeler? I think I'd rather go with the Phillies veteran.
Oh,
Reynaldo
he's good.
Lopez for Atlanta, I think is another one, as you said.
Yeah.
And Hunter Green has been kind of a sneaky good one there that I think will get some down ballot votes.
But Wheeler's just so consistent. I mean, you know pretty much what you're going to get out of him every start. And with Sale, I think there's a lot of people going, how real is this? Is this going to keep up? So I think those are the two questions you're asking there.
And each of these awards have just a different context too, because Cy Young Award isn't most valuable pitcher. We
Right.
think of it as that in a way, but it's just who had the best year as a pitcher. Don't care if you came back. Don't care if you were fortifying a rotation. Now, again, that's a small part of the narrative, I think. But when you're just looking at the numbers, who was the best, that's really what it comes down to, in my eyes, for Cy Young Award. MVP is a much more different things, much more nuanced, nebulous kind of conversation about who's most valuable to their team. Is it Shohei Ohtani? Is it another DH in Marcelo Zuna? Or is it Ketel Marte, who very well could be both a Silver Slug Award winner at second base or a Gold Glove Award winner at second base? You look I'm putting you on the spot. I see how frustrated you are because this isn't an easy conversation.
No. Well, and the thing is, I honestly would have gone for Marte, but now I'm wondering what kind of injury we're talking about here with him. And I think that may knock him a little bit, especially, it's a recency bias. If it's in the last half of the year and it really keeps him out for a while, I think voters will remember that. And if the Dodgers hold off both the Pods and the D-backs, then I absolutely think he's going to get love no matter what, as you can tell from all the comments and everything, on your video. But I think that Shohei is absolutely, if he can carry the Dodgers through all this injuries and everything else that they've had, I absolutely think he'll get it.
Yeah, I mean, he's having a historic season, and I wrote at the beginning of the year that it's going to take a historic season for him to win that award, just like it took a historic season for Aaron Judge to defeat Shohei Ohtani, right? He needed to break the American League home run record, and yet I think Ohtani was the more valuable player in my eyes. And, we talk about what that word value means, because is it value unto itself? Is it value to the team? Because the Angels weren't going to the postseason. So in theory, it wasn't that valuable. And is it valuable in comparison with teammates? Because now you look and say, well, you still got Freddie Freeman. You still got Mookie Betts. You still got all these great players surrounding you. So now your contributions, whether it's 40 home runs and 40 stolen bases, isn't as valuable. It's a difficult conversation, difficult thing to figure out in the end. A historic season from Ohtani, I think, is going to do it.
I think so too. And I think that's such a nebulous, like you said, the most valuable. What does valuable mean? And I think that's such a nebulous conversation that's why we get so many people kind of go in different ways whenever it comes to that balloting.
I can't remember now if Sean Green hit 50 home runs. I think he might have fallen shy. I think he hit 49 home runs, which is the franchise record for the Dodgers. So again, he hits 50 homers. Now you go, this historic franchise dating all the way back to Brooklyn when they were the bridegrooms, right? When they had all of these Brooklyn Atlantics, all of these different monikers. And now Shohei Ohtani stands atop the pile of history for Dodgers. I think it's his to lose for sure, but I don't know that it should be a slam dunk, since he is only hitting and not playing on defense.
No, let's just say I don't think it'll be unanimous if he does win. How about that?
Yeah. Kevin, go ahead and plug away. Let folks know where you're at. Appreciate you joining me today.
Dude, so much fun.
As always.
Absolutely. Always fun. Now, I'm over there with Patrick at justbaseball.com, so make sure you're checking us out. Put the Twitter handle in at KGH23. And absolutely looking forward to, as you said, this final quarter of the season. It's going to be fun.
Also, make sure you plug away your podcast, because you've got a great one that comes out every single week. Awesome interviews. You never cease to amaze me with the guests you're able to get, and then how good the conversations are. You've definitely built up, a lot of rapport with players over the last few years.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, while you're hunting things down the Colorado side of things, I'm often over with the Mets or Braves or whoever's in town. Clubhouse Chatter. It's part of the Just Baseball podcast network, like Rockies Insider is. And yeah, would absolutely love to have you follow along. It'd be great.
Awesome. At Patrick D. Lyons, at Rockies_Insider, just about everywhere. Podcast, YouTube, please support. We're just getting started. Help build some more of that momentum, because we know what we say about momentum and we know what we say about sign-offs. Tune in tomorrow because you'll hear that sign-off.